Hello, my darlings. Right, let's go with a lot of words today. Other people's words. Start with Yanis Varoufakis, who is Greek, and commenting on the situation in Europe. After years of higher interest rates and large deficits, the Eurozone South had managed to decrease the interest rate differential with the North. Don't worry. However, the differential was still there, especially for personal and credit card loans, where it was huge. Thus, German capital, produced by the German ants, hard, cheap labour, and directed by the irresponsible German grasshoppers, flowed south in search of higher returns. Now, I'll quickly tidy this up. It's initially a Martin Wolf idea, this ants and grasshoppers story, for describing the world and especially Europe. The ants being the workers, Germany, the grasshoppers from the Walt Disney story being more flighty, eaters, consumers rather than workers. And when winter comes, the ants have got food stored by, and the grasshopper comes and says, well, can I share your food? And there are two versions of the story about what happens, what the decision the ants make. So the ant and the grasshopper, and we're in Europe. The German ants have worked hard and made money, and the drive of this story is there are worker ants in countries and there are grasshoppers in countries, as opposed to German ants, Greek grasshoppers. There are German ants in Germany, German grasshoppers in Germany, Greek ants and Greek grasshoppers. Right, so I'll go on. The German capital, produced by the German ants, hard, cheap labour, and directed by the irresponsible German grasshoppers, flowed south in search of high returns. What happened when the money floods in unexpectedly? Well, bubbles form. It is that simple. In Spain, they took the form of real estate bubbles. In Greece, the bubbles manifested themselves in the form of public debt, as the Greek grasshoppers, also known as Greek developers, found it easier to grab the German capital flows via the account of the state, whose administrators, probably grasshoppers, were only too keen to shower the Greek grasshoppers with procurement contracts. The precise form of the southern bubbles does not matter. They would burst asunder anyway once the massively larger bubbles created by our transatlantic Uber grasshoppers, Wall Street, popped. What does matter is that the German ants could see their hard work was not translating into a better life, but into more drudgery in Germany, the German ants, and less purchasing power for the German ants. Let's move on. This is from Interfluidity. The European policy breakthrough ? Today's money quote obviously is this from Fitch. Fitch slapping the Eurozone. A comprehensive solution, or should I say a comprehensive solution to the Eurozone crisis is technically and politically beyond reach. Right, we've known this for a while, but them is saying it now. Okay, I've highlighted other things down below. Tyler Cowen, who you probably know, has been emphasizing the possibility that the ECB will quietly fund sovereigns via the banking system. That's the Sarko-Corzine scam. Down at the bottom, the Anglo-American punditosphere, us talking about it, are unimpressed. After all, European banks are already in deep trouble because of their sovereign holdings. So, will it work? Will it not work? We'll move on and go to the Archdruid report article after the one I used on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. And I read, over the long run, the mismatch is a problem that will solve itself once the unravelling of the industrial economy goes far enough. The superstructure will come apart, leaving a great many human resource managers, corporate image consultants, strategic marketing specialists, and the like, with about as much chance as finding a job in their fields as they would have done in 17th century Osaka or 14th century Milan. That's referring to other things mentioned earlier in the article. In the short and middle term, though, the mismatch will almost certainly continue to show itself in exactly the same way that has been visible over the last few decades. More and more often, business ventures simply won't be able to make enough money to cover start-up costs or to stay in business. That's the take there. And we go on to an absolutely smashing little speech by Mark Carney to the Bank of Canada, Growth in the Age of Deleveraging. Highly recommended you go and read it. I'll just leave it there. We will come back to more of this, but I'll give you the opening lines of the introduction. These are trying times. In our largest trading partner, the United States of America, households are undergoing a long process of balance sheet repair. Partly as a consequence, American demand for Canadian exports is 30 billion lower than normal. In Europe, a renewed crisis is underway, and increasing number of countries are being forced to pay unsustainable rates on their borrowings, with a vicious deleveraging process taking hold in its banking sector. The euro area is sinking into recession. Given ties of trade, finance and confidence, the rest of the world is beginning to feel the effects. This is from an article in the UK Telegraph, a paragraph towards the end. I think it's a Warner wrote the article, Jeremy Warner. It is in any case outrageous for the Bundesbank to think of this as a global problem which should therefore require global contributions. This is the Eurozone problem. The Eurozone is collectively the richest economic region in the world. I think that's slightly overdoing it, I think, but still. That it cannot sort out its own affairs is pathetic and almost willful, while to expect poorer nations to contribute to crisis resolution on the basis that if the euro goes down, then all will suffer together demonstrates an astonishing level of arrogance. And Europe is still absolutely imbued, shot through with arrogance. Right, let's go back to the beginning again and Yanis Varoufakis. Meanwhile, the Greek ants were both desperate and indignant. The grasshoppers of both countries, Germany and Greece in this case, pointed the finger at them, calling them all sorts of names. Their puzzlement hit record levels when told that they had, in effect, threatened, through their profligate ways, to bring down civilization as we know it. They scratched their heads, thinking that there must be a mistake, since they never had any good days during the supposedly good times. They had struggled then, and they are struggling now, admittedly far more desperately. As for the bailouts, they simply cannot see them, as no one tells them that the mentioned zillions end up in Europe's bankrupt banks, where they duly fall into bottomless black holes. And when they see Germans, probably the German ants, calling them thieves, corrupt spendthrift overreachers, it's not hard to reach into the collective memory for moments in history that make it ever so easy to become, again, anti-German. Whether this is happening, one of these big plans, is unlikely. It just is working out this way, that the divide and conquer that's ruled history in Europe over the ages is coming out again here. It is pitting German ants against Greek ants. And the pitting happens to be being done by the German and the Greek grasshoppers. So back to interfluidity and highlighted line. But if European states become dependent on bank finance, this is the Sarko-Corzine trade again, they become dependent on ECB finance. The ECB would have the power to manufacture fiscal crises for a misbehaving state at will and with marvellous deniability. And again, what we've seen through history, not just Europe but everywhere, are power struggles. Sarko, arrogant bastard, thinks he's got it cracked by the Sarko-Corzine trade, and French bonds and Italian bonds, Spanish bonds will be bought by the banks because the ECB will sort it out, not understanding that the ECB, a young, new, fresh central bank, has always been struggling under the shackles that it's been put under. But if the Corzine trade flies, then the ECB has then got the governments by the balls. He hasn't quite clicked onto that yet. He's clever, but he's not that clever. And we go to Archdruid report again. The second implication also relates to a core theme of this blog. That's the Archdruid report blog, though it's on a larger scale. While other economic arrangements are certainly imaginable, the one we have right now is strictly limited in what it can accomplish by what can make a profit. To repeat Daly's term, it has to be a bankable project, or by and large it won't get done. This may just turn out to be a far more dangerous limitation than anybody has yet realized. There are, after all, any number of plans for grand projects in response to the end of the age of cheap abundant energy. Each of them would require the investment of a great deal of capital, labour, raw materials and other resources, and under present arrangements none of them can go forward unless someone can count on making a profit from making them happen. Under present arrangements, in turn, it's likely that none of them will be profitable enough to get a construction loan or to cover their operating costs once they get built. Under the system that we have now, this new green replacement for carbon energy stuff is not a go. Back to Carney and the Canadian presentation he gave, and I've highlighted this line that's not far into the article. The chart there is US non-financial debt to GDP ratio going back to 1916, and you can see it's too high or not, we don't know. But another general lesson is that excessive private debts end up in the public sector one way or another. Just the way it is. Further down on the Carney report about the world is this about Europe. And at the bottom it's the balance of payments stupid that Martin Wolf goes on and on about, and of course it's quite right. But we have unit labour costs in peripheral countries are up relative to the core, to Germany. This is ants' labour costs compared to German ant labour costs. Going back to 2000, and Germany are 15-16% more expensive, and the others are 25 to 30-40% more expensive. So that's France up a bit, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Spain and Greece. Their ants have been paid more because the German ants have been effectively crushed over those 10 years. So the German ants have been crushed. So what happens now? It is impossible for The German ants, it seems, to raise up to the levels of the others. Those others, France, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Spain and Greece, their ants costs have to come down to Germany's. And what happens when they come down to Germany's? Does everybody level out and everyone's happy? No. Then they fight and fight more, trying to go down to the lowest common denominator for the lowest ant labour costs. And who will be doing the driving down? It'll be the grasshoppers. Let's finish with Yanis Varoufakis. Today there is another wrinkle that needs to be added to this moral tale of the ants and the grasshoppers. That when the ants and the grasshoppers are distributed across the division separating surplus from deficit nations, Germany surplus nation, the others deficit nations, within a badly designed monetary union, the Eurozone, the stage is set for a depression that sets all against all in a vicious spiral from which only losers can emerge, the stage from which no one can be bailed out, even those who, like Germany, can bail out themselves by leaving the Eurozone, will be committing a form of slow-burning, long-run suicide. Our only option to subvert the dominant narrative, recognising the coexistence of neglected ants and over-pumpered grasshoppers throughout the Eurozone, is a good beginning. What he's saying is, let's not go for this divide and conquer, Germany against Greece. Let's go for what is the reality. The ants of Greece, France, Germany and everyone else, and the grasshoppers of Greece, France, Germany and everyone else. But it won't make any difference, because it's the grasshoppers who, mainly for some internal mental grasshopper history genetics, are the ones that do this power play stuff. And those are the ones that play the game for power and play it really seriously and get power. They get power over the ants. The grasshoppers will always be there. And what we'll see here is that the ants' savings of Germany will be lost. And the ants of Greece and Italy and Belgium and Portugal and Italy and then France will be blamed for the loss. But all along, it was probably the grasshoppers what done it. I'll leave it there. Have a good weekend. Bye.